Hi, everybody. Welcome. Uh, I'm Anahita Azrahimi. I'm the Executive and Creative Director of Toronto Outdoor Art Fair. Welcome to the 59th Toronto Outdoor Art Fair that's now adapted as Toronto Online Art Fair. I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about TOAF and what we're doing this year and why we're hosting this important conversation. And I'm just going to wait a little bit for people to join in. So there will be a little bit of a pause and a moment of silence. So as many of you know, every year we gather at Nathan Phillips Square and bring together hundreds of artists and over 130,000 art lovers in a vibrant and accessible environment. It's been a major undertaking for a very small non-for-profit like us to pivot Canada's largest outdoor art fair entirely online. It's been a little bit crazy too. Our efforts have been widely successful, and we've managed within a very short period of time to create a great sense of community online and expand our reach. And it's even reached beyond our borders, which we didn't expect, and it's fascinating. And I can confidently say that our online platform is accessible, inclusive, and radically welcoming to all artists and art lovers, just like our face-to-face gathering at Nathan Phillips Square. In some ways, I think this online representations of artists has helped break the hierarchical barriers that we still experience in the visual arts world. As a large-scale, free public event that takes place in a public space, we attract audiences of all walks of life, all backgrounds, all abilities, and all income levels who engage with our artists freely without feeling intimidated by the art speak and the barriers of gallery walls. We, at TOAF, we strive to be radically welcoming. And it is because of this core value that we find ourselves aligned with the focus of the Year of Public Art that aims to improve public accessibility and engagement with public art across the city while being reflective of Toronto's diversity. Our 60th anniversary next year coincides with the launch of the Year of Public Art, and we hope with our programming to make a valuable contribution to the goals of this initiative. So I'm really excited to welcome Rui Pimenta, founder and co-director of ArtSpin, who will be moderating this panel and introduce our esteemed speakers. I'm really excited to be hosting everyone here. So welcome, and Rui, please take it away from me.
Thank you, Anahita, and thank you for the invitation to moderate this panel. It's a real honor. And congratulations to you and your team for the massive undertaking that must have been taking the Toronto Outdoor Art Fair online. I'm sure that was no easy feat, but it seems like it's been a great almost 11 days, I think, of programming. So well done.
Yeah.
10.
Yeah.
So yes, hello everyone. My name is Rui Pimenta. It's a pleasure to be moderating today's panel on Toronto's Year of Public Art. As Anahita said, I'm the founder and co-director of ArtSpin, and since 2009, ArtSpin has been producing and curating a multidisciplinary range of programming that focuses on site specificity and site responsiveness, presented in unique and alternative public spaces. These projects have been presented in various formats, including large-scale bike tours, multi-day group exhibitions, and festivals. Over these years, me and my amazing colleague, Lane Hinton, have developed a strong and ever-growing appreciation for public art. So the Year of Public Art is an initiative that I'm really excited about. So with that said, I want to introduce our amazing group of panelists. And first we have Bonnie Devine. Bonnie is a cross-disciplinary artist, educator, curator, and writer who lives and works in Toronto. Descendant of the Anishinaabe of Serpent River First Nation, Ganabajing in Ontario. Bonnie's artwork emerges from the storytelling and image-making traditions embedded in Ojibwe culture. Her installation, video, and curatorial projects have been exhibited in North America and South America, Russia, Europe, and China, including the Art Gallery of Ontario, the Berlin Festival, the National Museum of the American Indian, and today's Art Museum of Beijing, China. She's the Associate Professor Emerita and founding chair of the Indigenous Visual Culture Program at OCAD University. Welcome, Bonnie.
Thank you.
We also have Corey Jackson with us. Corey is a curator based in Toronto. She's currently the RBC Senior Curator, having joined RBC in 2014, overseeing the management and strategy of their corporate art collection. Previously, she worked at the University of Toronto Art Museum, Sotheby's Canada, various commercial galleries, and as an independent curator. She finished her master's in visual studies curatorial practice at the University of Toronto with a focus on contemporary Canadian artists. Her curatorial interests focus on cross-generational dialogues and developing the role of collections as accountable and inclusive narratives. Welcome. We also have Just John Samuels, born and raised in Scarborough, Toronto. Jamaican-Canadian Just John is a musician, an art director, described by many as a Renaissance boy, given his diverse contributions to the vibrancy of Toronto's DIY scene. Inspired by social activism, he became the driving force behind Blank Canvases, an art collective that provides platforms for marginalized artists. Welcome, Just John. And finally, we have Joe Sellers. Joe is the project lead for Toronto's Year of Public Art 2021. Over his 13 years at the City of Toronto, he has worked with a variety of high-profile artists in the realization of several large-scale projects via roles as assistant manager of programming for city cultural events and production lead for Nuit Blanche Toronto. Joe was also vice president and director of operations for the Design Exchange Edit Festival in 2017. And anyone who knows Joe knows that he's a tireless and passionate person when it comes to the city's arts and culture sector. So welcome to all of you. Unfortunately, Michelle Pearson-Clark, who was also on this panel, is not able to join us. But thank you, Michelle, for the conversations we had in preparing for today's panel, they were really insightful and a lot of help in my own preparations. And on that note, thanks to all of the other panelists for the great conversations that we had in the lead up to this. So let's dive right into things. And Joe, maybe we can start things off with you. And perhaps you could tell us a bit about the Year of Public Art 2021, about its overall vision and how you imagine it will impact the city's cultural sector.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes? All right. Last thing we want, can you imagine I go on this like 10-minute thing and then I'm on mute or something and everybody's like, can you repeat that, please? Anyway, so sorry. Thank you, Rui, and I gotta recognize Anahita and Toronto Online Art Fair for holding this webinar. It's an honor to be here and really appreciate having the opportunity to talk about a really great city initiative, Toronto's Year of Public Art. So I can give a little bit of, I can go back into the last 3 or 4 years of history and how this sort of all came to be. And it starts with, it starts with probably starting with Sarah Diamond and Dan Silver writing a report on redefining what public art in Toronto is and what it should be and what it needs and so forth. And it collects a whole bunch of information, whether it's talks and interviews and consultation with artists, cultural institutions, private sector developers from, I think, all the way back to 1967 to 2015-ish. And then I think that started a bit of a fire, right? And I think it got the mayor of Toronto interested in looking at doing a bit of a revamp and an overhaul of what public art is within the city of Toronto. So fast forwarding a little bit to Mayor Tory's election campaign in 2018, he said, you know what, we're going to do a year of public art. And he made this election promise and went public with it. And I think many of us were like, yeah, this is great. Let's do this, right? This is an opportunity. And that quickly led to, you know, in response to Sarah's and Dan's report, it led to an internal working group and an external working group working together in order to create a new 10-year public art strategy, which turned out to be a 10-year public art strategy. So that 10-year public art strategy was passed by council in December of 2019, so fairly recently. As part of that strategy, the city said, well, and you know, in response and out of respect for the mayor's idea, we're going to do a year of public art for Toronto, right? And that is an opportunity to launch the new 10-year public art strategy. So, so for those of you who have seen the 10-year public art strategy, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, it's all online. You can check it out. But it's a long document that's really based on creativity, community everywhere, which is kind of the vision statement for the 10-year public art strategy. The year itself is derived from the strategy itself. So we're not trying to make up anything new, but the year itself is an opportunity, and we're treating it as a bit of a test bed in order to test out some of these theories within that 10-year public art strategy. Because the strategy itself is not a blueprint or a framework. It is conceptually idea encompassing, I think it's 21 guiding principles for how to move forward with public art within the city of Toronto. So whenever do you have an opportunity to try out a bunch of ideas and be okay with failures and allowing yourself to tweak and make things better, so you're not locked into a commitment, right? So the idea is at the end of 2021, we have a really good plan of what works and what people want and what people don't want in order to launch into the next 9 years or whatever that looks like. So some key pillars, foundations of your public art include, you know, number one, it's to raise awareness for the arts and culture sector and all the public artworks within the city of Toronto, right? It's to celebrate what we already have. We have a lot, and more than many cities within the city, within, you know, across the globe. And you know, I think, you know, Mayor Tory has always said this: you can't have a livable city without art and without culture and without creativity. So so having his support on this has been absolutely amazing. So in addition to celebrating what we have, that includes shining a spotlight on the existing collections and the existing artworks that exist within the city of Toronto. So that could be a streetscape that's produced out of the BIAs. That could be you know, public artworks that are produced out of the Percent for Public Art, out of city planning, working with developers. Or it could be Street Art Toronto. You know, they have a hugely robust street art mural program that was created out of an anti-graffiti program, I think, in the Ford days, and has evolved into this humongous thing that is really great for the city of Toronto, and they get really good response, and they do good work. So so I think in addition to that, shoring up funding for the sector is a big part of what your public art represents too, right? Promoting public art everywhere, simplifying the process. So simplifying how we commission public artworks within the city of Toronto, for the city of Toronto and the residents and the visitors to Toronto. Building new collaborations between the private sector, cultural institutions, artists, curators, outer communities, with a huge focus on outside the core, right? If you look, part of what the original report stated, you know, it identified what are called art deserts, right? 70% of public artworks are downtown in the core, while 70% of the population is outside the core. So really trying to address that inequity there, and trying to get artworks outside the core and get emerging artists and other artists, for that matter, to create new work. So I think a couple of other things that are key, really foundational to what we're trying to accomplish here is getting money out the door into artists' hands to create new works in response to the new public art strategy, with a focus on diversity, with a focus on Indigenous placemaking. Like, we cannot ignore the social climate that we live in right now, right? So there's an opportunity here to really capitalize and use the money that we've been sort of gaining momentum on, and currently, partially funded by council in the city with some seed funding. But we really want to turn that money right around and do net new projects for the city of Toronto. That being said, it doesn't all need to be temporary. Like, that's one of the great things about redefining what public art is within the city of Toronto, is that temporary is okay. A project that's up for a month or a year, or sitting on a developer site that's waiting to be developed while it goes through permitting processes, right? So using sites like that as opportunities to create public artwork, so it's not just an empty lot. And I think, I think the last thing I'd say on this, Rui, is that some of it's inside baseball too. And that means that we within the city of Toronto, we need to look interdivisionally, and we need to work better with each other, right? So, and that's crossing a whole, there are divisions within the city of Toronto, city planning, and urban design specifically, the Percent for Public Art program, working with developers. There is, cultural events, doing Nuit Blanche, which is more temporary, of course. Street Art Toronto, I mentioned before, doing their mural program, and of course the Public Art Office and the existing collection. So, like, the reason I bring that up is because, for instance, Street Art Toronto, they don't just put murals up on overpasses or on hydro boxes or on Jersey curbs. They really focus on working with the artists to bring them along with a focus on mentorship, right? So, and they teach the artists, and trust me, I'm a generalist on all this, right? I'm not a subject matter expert. I'm trying to pull together many divisions and speak, hopefully respectfully, for the work that they do. But being able to share that knowledge, let's say, for instance, between Street Art Toronto and what they do for the artists and what they do for the art sector within the city of Toronto, being able to share that with other divisions would be huge, because other divisions would have so much to learn from the work that they do. So that's what I talk about inside baseball, and creating some kind of connective tissue between the divisions in order to have a common theme. Not that I'm saying standardize everything. I'm not saying that. I'm saying sharing the knowledge and helping interdivisionally the process. So, and I could talk a little bit more about that in some time.
Excellent, thank you. The pandemic has wreaked havoc on so many areas of life, including, of course, arts and culture in the city. Can you tell us how it's affected the Year of Public Art, and perhaps share any updates regarding changes that have been made in response to this, including changes to funding?
Yeah, that's, obviously that was going to be asked. That's a bit of a hot button. Excuse me, it's actually 31 degrees in my office here, so I don't have air conditioning at the home office in the back of the garage.
Didn't mean to put you on the hot seat or anything.
No, it's totally okay. So COVID-19 has definitely through the ringer. The city of Toronto, I'm proud of the city of Toronto. I'm proud of the corporation. I'm proud for the staff that have been redeployed, and they're being asked to do things that they don't normally do. And the other folks that are sort of left behind to keep services going in a really, really crazy time, right? So to try to answer your question, we've had to position ourselves, right? We have to be sensitive to the fact that not only the sector, the arts and culture sector is hurting, Toronto is hurting, the country, the world is hurting. So we're sensitive to spending a lot of money on things that might not be deemed as core essentials, right? That being said, the planning for the Year of Public Art you know, obviously took a bit of a hit, and it slowed us down. It has for sure. We were already on an accelerated planning cycle, and but we're here now, and we're really pulling together. What some of the benefits from COVID-19 is that if there wasn't pressure on the Year of Public Art to be successful before, there's more pressure on it now. So we're in a sense doubling down on what Year of Public Art is and what it represents, because we're rolling it into recovery efforts. So the machine that we had going for Toronto's Year of Public Art, set to kick off in January of 21, we were able to shore some of that up as we divert resources to the project. So just recently, because projects, certain programs, certain events are being canceled because of COVID, right? We're not able to pull together large projects and large events. So some of those staff are available and the time's available. So we've been able to shift some of those times, whether it's a day here, a day there, in order to help out on the project, in order to keep it moving and to speed up the plans in order to be ready for a launch late fall. So political support's been pretty good because it has been rolled into to TOAF efforts. And for those of you who don't understand TOAF, so TOAF is the Toronto Office of Recovery and Rebuild, which is led by Azrahimi, and that started up probably maybe around 2 months ago or so. So you know, being lucky enough to work with some of those folks, with Azrahimi, you know, Pat Tobin, Marguerite Piggott, and some other folks on that team, that's sort of working very closely with the mayor's office, of course, to be able to figure out the art element of what recovery looks like and what the rebuild looks like. And Toronto's Year of Public Art is a big part of that. So I'll just say it slowed us down a bit, but I think we're chugging along. We're going to have to make some hard decisions on what's possible in the time that we're given. And the last couple of points I'd say is that, you know, we're not going to buy our way out of this, right? The city is bleeding money in the realm of 10 million a day, 65 million a weekish, and the city can't do this by themselves. So there's a large lean on corporate fundraising, whether that's from corporate sponsorship through Corporate Canada, Corporate Toronto, or foundations and philanthropic efforts, and public dollars through grants for province and the feds, for that matter. So we really need everybody's help in order to bring this together. But I think we have a common voice in that everybody seems really invested. They want to see this happen. So this is a bit of an call to action to say, let's make this happen together, because the city can't do it alone, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
Great. Thank you for that. And I got to say, I, for one, was really just really thrilled that Year of Public Art wasn't postponed until 2022. I think it's commendable that we're going ahead next year, and I think it's more, you know, urgently needed than ever. A lot of what you said is a great segue to bring the rest of the panelists into the conversation. And I'd like to start with the following question. You know, given the ravaging impact of COVID on the cultural sector, the Year of Public Art is now being positioned as an excellent opportunity to help with the city's cultural recovery. It is, however, you know, it's easy to see how during these precarious times, the idea of cultural recovery might be hijacked by the seemingly more pragmatic and therefore urgent needs of economic recovery. So, you know, I'm wondering, panelists, what are your thoughts on this, and how do you think the Year of Public Art needs to move forward in a way that truly respects and addresses the needs of cultural recovery that are distinct from economic concerns? So I don't know, Corey, maybe we could start with you.
Sure. I mean, I feel like there's elements of that Joe really spoke to, and I guess I'd like to go back to the beginning of your question, because I know from my perspective, and I'd love to hear the other panelists' perspectives on this as well, the idea of economic recovery as being in parallel or not infused with cultural recovery seems not accurate. Like they are tied together. The way that we move forward economically, what we value in our culture, what we bring forward is tied to how we understand our culture. And there's so many opportunities for us to look at how do we re-articulate our value of art in this moment in ways that allow for access, allow for payment of artists, but also greater opportunities for all of us to see that value economically, but also value to ourselves personally in our lives. I think when COVID hit, it was a moment for me personally to kind of spend some time and take a step back, thinking about, this economic moment. There were so many conversations about how this was going to hit our GDPs across Canada, but also in Toronto. And I think it was one of the first moments where I was really taking a step back and looking at, well, what is the GDP of our arts and culture sector in Ontario? And we know that it's inherently a huge part of how we live our lives, how we understand and navigate the city, but it's also a huge part of how our economies move forward. And I think that they shouldn't be seen as in parallel, but rather like in tandem and infused with each other. And I think the Year of Public Art offers a really nice opportunity for us to kind of reevaluate the value that arts is going to bring to the city, and to re-articulate the impact it's going to have on how we value and celebrate art. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of divides, I think, between sometimes the art community and how we define economic success. And there's a lot of work that we can do to kind of break down some of those pre-constructed barriers.
Yeah, great. This word recovery, it's a very loaded word. And Bonnie, I know you and I had a really interesting conversation about the idea of recovery and its more common associations with physical and mental health. Something that's particularly relevant during a pandemic when questions of public health are all around us, not to mention the ways in which they're all too easily distorted and politicized. So I'm wondering, Bonnie, if you could maybe talk a little bit about what's most important to you in light of your own personal experiences within the arts sector and beyond, about the idea of recovery when it comes to the role and potential of the Year of Public Art.
Sure, I'd love to talk about that. I find it very disturbing, actually, to hear so much emphasis on monetary concerns or economic concerns, GDP, or how are we going to pay for this, or all of that. I find that I think of culture in a different way. I think of culture as the muscle of our community. It's one of the muscles anyway, and it's a big, important muscle. And it's atrophying right now because we are isolated from one another. The discourse that cultural production depends on, the conversations and the face-to-face encounters have been curtailed, and our muscle is weak. And I think about a sick person, a sick city that has been kind of in isolation in a hospital ward, and needs resuscitation, needs waking up. And I think of the Year of Public Art as a great opportunity to revive our notion of what Corey said about reassessing what it means to us, what this great muscle of culture that flows through all of us, all of our communities, means to us, and how important it is to us. And I think we're in a very difficult situation health-wise right now, and a very difficult situation socially, because we can't talk to one another or meet together. And so I see the first few months of the Year of Public Art as a period of reawakening. It's like Sleeping Beauty, the prince comes in. Well, who's the prince? Prince is the Year of Public Art. The prince is the one who says, come on, it's safe. You know, we're afraid right now. We need to get over that. We've been given so many instructions about what not to do, and we need someone to say, yes, you know, come on, we can join together. We can gather together. We can stretch that muscle. We can exercise it gently at first, like a convalescent patient, and gradually learn how to walk again, how to leap again, how to dance, how to joyfully re-engage with life. And we need that muscle, to make no mistake. And it has very little, I'm sorry to say, but very little to do with economics. It has to do with spirit, and it has to do with creativity. And these things are not measured in dollars and cents, even though, you know, as we learn how to re-engage with these passions and strengths of ours, we'll have an economic benefit. There's no question about that, but that shouldn't be the thing that we're looking at first. We need to treat ourselves gently. We need to coax one another to talk together, to argue a little bit, you know, to try things out, to experiment, and to make beautiful, beautiful expressions of our re-emergence from that long sleep that we are in right now.
Thank you, Bonnie. That was really beautifully put. Just John, I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this question of recovery.
So beautiful. Thanks for sharing. It truly is a time of, you know, of healing, you know, and everybody is passing around this, the term recovery, and I don't see it so much in that way. I see it more as reimagining. We must not go back to the normal. Was the normal even serving? You know, was it serving, you know, oppressed voices? Was it serving, you know, certain agendas that possibly ran, you know, and usually do run a lot of the time as this way of profit over people. And there is no liberation in profit over people. And we've seen, you know, even different countries that have dealt with, you know, the COVID efforts and the stages of quarantine that have, you know, pushed profit as the agenda over people and what that has created. And it's not good, and it doesn't bring people closer to liberation. And more than ever do we truly need this idea of liberation. And how do we reach liberation? What is liberation? I believe that liberation is that conduit that runs seamless in everybody's souls in a different way, one that allows a contribution to stories that we've heard, stories that we've seen, stories that we've embraced in different perspectives. That's the beautiful thing about art. It allows us to tell our narrative and be able to understand the narratives of others, because we so much understood our own story through the lenses of others as well. It truly is a unified field. It truly is a oneness that is the new ideology that is going to be pushed in this new decade. And I feel that with the Year of Public Art, we can be that example of that. We can be that symbolism. We can be that inspiration that truly uplifts people out of this, you know, this isolation, and truly allow this again, as Bonnie had spoken to, this reemergence, this awakening, this tuning of spirit, and be that reference point, not only for our city, but internationally, for cities to look at, wow, look at what Toronto did, and look at how they're starting this decade, look how they're setting that trend, and inspire nations around the world.
Cool. Thank you. That's yeah, lovely. You know, as significant as the changes, you know, triggered by COVID-19 are, you know, we're currently living through another equally massive paradigm shift as demands for equity from Black Lives Matter and Indigenous voices ring out with an urgency that feels unprecedented in its ability to really grab hold of the popular consciousness on a global level. It goes without saying that Year of Public Art needs to be an exemplar in this particular area of recovery. That said, what are some suggestions on strategies, in your opinions, that the Year of Public Art needs to embody in order to ensure its place as a leading force when it comes to finding solutions related to anti-Black racism, Indigenous rights, and other areas concerning social, political, and economic equity?
Yes, I believe in the mandate of the Year of Public Art is to reflect the social climate. So it would be off tone to not use this platform as a way to uplift the many various voices that is speaking to of the time. Not only is the current climate needing of a change, we need to do our part until we see justice. And we need to educate ourselves on the project that is systemic racism. And we all have a part in this. We all need to be responsible and use our positionalities and make and devote ourselves to our own acts of justice. We need to use our experience, our platforms, and our resources in order to continue and to push the new ideology and ultimately push to the idea of the greater good of humanity. So everybody has a part, whether it's cats that are protesting, or it's CEOs sacrificing their positions and uplifting marginalized voices and people of color, or using spaces where we have the opportunity to represent Black artists in public spaces and truly create spaces and platforms for representation and sustainability, so that there is reference points for that young boy and that young Black girl in Scarborough to see a Black artist who did this amazing 60-foot installation right on Yonge and Dundas Square, and be inspired that I can do that too. And also for spaces and residencies in like Etobicoke and St. Clair and the Junction to have representation of said communities in those spaces, so that they feel championed in what they're doing and they feel that their communities are being heard and understood.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I'd like to say,
yeah, would anyone else care to speak to that?
If I could.
Of course.
I'm really interested in this notion of the monumentality of public art and the way that monuments are coming down right now. And we're seeing a different kind of expression of our history. And, Black history has been pretty invisible here, and Indigenous history as well in this city. And I'm not suggesting, bronze statues that commemorate our histories, but I am suggesting a new paradigm that will allow for a spontaneous expression of cultural continuity here in the city, and of the connections that bring us together. I like the idea of that John was talking about, in different communities, that they are able to bring their voices forward, and they see possibilities, they see channels, they see doors that are open, not closed. And a lot of this has to do with discussing what exactly are those monuments about, and how can we create something that is just as durable? It may be ephemeral, but just as durable in our memory and in our discourse as a bronze statue on University Avenue. And I think that there's an energy there and a beauty there that we haven't really tapped into in Toronto yet. And I'm hoping that the reawakening that we've been talking about will allow that to come forward and express itself differently than we've seen it expressed in the past.
Yeah, excellent. I couldn't agree more. The pandemic has really I think forced all of us to rethink our relationships to both public space and the general public. We navigate our way around new and strange protocols regarding physical distancing when gathering in public. This presents obvious challenges, but also interesting opportunities that might reshape how we think about the meaning and possibilities of public art. Not to mention the public's relationship to public art. How do you imagine some of this reshaping might manifest itself? Corey, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
For sure. And I think a lot of it really goes back to what Bonnie and John were also saying earlier about kind of breaking down and reimagining what the barriers to access of art have been, and what defines public art, what defines the public, and who that work is being made for. And I think there's a really amazing opportunity with the Year of Public Art. And I think it's been kind of entwined through the conversations along the way, and it's being reemphasized by the moment that we're in, to understand that public art needs to be truly accessible to a public. It needs to be reflective of the moment that we're in, and be a record of that, but then also shift and be responsive. I think the programming that is starting to be built out, and the approach to programming, is something that I think for me feels really unique, in that it's looking to who the audience is and bringing the work there, and trying to look at what are the artists in the communities across Toronto wanting to say within their spaces, what needs to be said, what does the public need to access to feel that sense of community and connection that art allows.
Would anyone else care to speak to that particular point? Yeah, Bonnie.
Well, I just think about relational aesthetics. So things like dance, things like food, maybe reconsidering different ways that culture expresses itself that may not necessarily have been defined before as art, but probably should be defined as art. So I think cooking and eating together, sharing food is a huge thing. And I think that it's a breaking down of this notion of there's the artwork and here's the viewer, and there's a space between the two, where we could maybe have a more participatory kind of art making. Mm-hmm. So it's all building it together, and whatever that looks like. And I think that, to go back to the economics of this, the funding models are going to need to be stretched. They're going to need to be flexible in order to accommodate all of the kinds of ways that community may see itself expressing its cultural life, or its cultural lifeblood, and how it gets that going again, how it begins to infuse itself with that again so that it gets its strength back. And I think that for sure part of that is going to be money, yes, because money of course is a driver, but there's other things. And that participatory spirit and that open door to say, yes, come, do this, yes, set up tables, feed everybody, sit down and, have a glass of wine together. All of those sorts of things are important ways that we can overcome the ravages that this pandemic has had on us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. John, I'm sure, given your role with Blank Canvas, that you've got some thoughts on this question too.
It's truly, nothing can be built without community,
Mm-hmm.
And I know with my community, we are a resilient community, one that leans into adversity, and I feel like it's a good commentary to everything that the world is going through right now. We must, even though none of us can travel right now, the amount of internal traveling that we've all have been doing is, I'm sure, very extensive. And I think that really, really goes with growth. You know, you can't have growth without experiencing some form of adversity. And there always is that dialogue there. And again, we have such a beautiful opportunity to reimagine and reconsider how, you know, people can engage with art in 2020 and for the next decade. You know, why must art only be, you know, figures or frameworks on walls? You know, we could go so much more. We can embrace, you know, digital realities. We can embrace so many different. I love the piece that Bonnie was speaking to about food and like interacting, these things that are become so like, you know, kind of like foreign, and you kind of have to relearn these things again. You know what I mean? And like, and seeing that makes me really excited about the work and the installations that are going to be coming in, because how people are going to be interacting with it and where that kind of perspective goes from like the artist's idea and how people can kind of take a hold of it and make it their own. I think is always the beautiful thing and really cool for people to see, and for us to also see people experiencing the work themselves too. And I think that always goes a long way and it always earns a recommendation. And I think we've seen that in different ways too. We've seen, you know, how the classic Nuit Blanche was kind of working in the downtown spaces, and we saw what happened when it went to Scarborough and what happened and how exciting that was. And I think there has to be a flexibility of what we consider art and what art can do, because it is so liberating, and we have to allow it to be autonomous too.
Yes. No, some of the things that you're all saying, particularly around this dismantling of monumentality and just making more room for public art that includes social experience and participatory experience, is these are all things that are really near and dear to me personally. So I really welcome hearing that, especially from, you know, members of the External Advisory Committee to the Year of Public Art. It's encouraging. The other area regarding monumentality that I wanted to discuss with you guys and get your thoughts on is, you know, that sort of equally monumental and impenetrable reality that is sort of which artists get chosen to produce public art. Although experience in the realm of making public art is important, what do you guys think can be done to the strategies for commissioning public art to ensure that more diverse artists from a wider range of disciplines beyond sculpture, as well as young and emerging artists, get a chance to participate in these opportunities? Corey, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I feel like there's a huge amount of work to be done, and a reason why. It's a 10-year strategy as well around how transparency gets articulated, around how artists are engaged and which artists are engaged, and how jury selections and all the processes and systems that have already been put in place, why they exist, why they're there, how they could be otherwise articulated. Maybe there's opportunities to reimagine that. And I definitely see that. I mean, I work a lot with emerging artists and young artists, and oftentimes I really see those barriers around access to materials and access to working with larger budgets. It's a difficult, I think, hurdle to. Am I connected? Sorry, I just realized I lost connectivity.
No, we can still hear you.
Okay.
We can still hear
good.
you. Yeah.
I just can't see you. And I think there's some examples of how it's been done in really amazing ways. I'm thinking about Kari Swinnar's programming in the Don Valley and the integration of younger artists that she's brought forward. And there's a real opportunity to kind of reimagine and articulate what those barriers are, so that there can be some conversations about what needs to be done to break them down.
Bonnie, we spoke a lot about, and you really sort of championed for the need to have, you know, young artists and young voices, you know, present in whatever initiatives are put in place by the Year of Public Art. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about why that's such a priority for you.
Well, I think that the process of applying for a commission in the city of Toronto is very daunting and intimidating. It's a difficult process, and working with a budget, working with contractors and insurance companies and all of the affiliated services that go into it is a limiting factor in who applies and then who ultimately gets the commission. So I think we need mentorship, broad-based mentorship, not only for large, big dollar items, but for small projects. I like what John said about flexibility. We need flexibility so that there's all kinds of opportunities, and there are people, there are elders present. I'm using the term elders. What I mean are there are knowledgeable people who have experience, who are there to actually be beside the applicant as they're working through the process, so that there is a learning going on. There's a transfer, there's a conversation, and that, again, I'm going to use that metaphor of the muscle. But the muscle is being extended and grown and strengthened. And how does that happen? It's an oral tradition. You learn by watching, and that's how the teaching will happen. And I think that teaching and learning and mentoring and apprenticeships have not been emphasized enough in our cultural production here in the city, and certainly not in the public sphere. And I think that there is an opportunity here for us to take some of that economic strength that's been put into this process, not just to focus on the end product, but to focus on the participants in the production of that product, and to really build confidence and strength, and to trust the dream, to show young people that they can dream and they can put the dream out there, and then they can get the help they need to see that dream realized. And I think this is a huge opportunity for youth in our city, and it will pay back the city hugely. You know?
Yeah, John, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Love everything that Bonnie's and Mary have been saying, and resonate with it full-heartedly. It's really about inclusivity and putting an emphasis on allowing springboards for artists, for young artists, for young marginalized artists. I think about 2 years ago, 3 years back, when I was running my brick and mortar space, and I had the brick and mortar space, I had the community, we had 200 people attending our art shows every bi-weekly, and I just remember applying for all these grants and being declined and not getting accepted for any of these grants. And I was like, this is proven concept. Like, I have this space, we're working with some of the best emerging esteemed artists and professional artists, and we're still not getting these grants. And then I realized how coded it is, and how weaved it is into the system, and how there's such a formula, and how there's people who know how to use the formula and know how to exploit the formula, and are constantly getting these grants. And there's so many artists, so many exciting emerging artists that are falling between the cracks. I remember our gallery, in the first year, we were housing like all these artists that had gotten their ideas declined from bigger granting bodies. And some of those shows were some of the best shows that we've ever had. And these artists have gone on to have really exciting careers. And I think that's a testimony to what the system actually is doing, and all the artists that are falling between the cracks. One of the things that we've been doing with Blank Canvas on our educational portion side is teaching young artists how to work with these formulas, and how to build your ideas within those frameworks. And we just need the Year of Public Art to allow that flexibility, and to really give springboard to these artists. These artists are making the city profitable. These artists are making people come to the city. These artists are making developers buy buildings. Let's champion our artists, and let's be behind them, not when they're getting success, but through the whole process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. I mean, I'm looking at some of the questions that are coming in, and some of the things that we're talking about are touching on some of the questions. You know, how do newcomer artists, you know, get more involved in the process, and how do we ensure that open calls are really being inclusive and getting out to a more diverse range of artists, and who are the gatekeepers? Like, who makes up you know, that body that not only sort of puts out a call, but then you know, sort of processes and juries. So I'm curious to hear you guys talk a little bit more about that, because I can see how this is a delicate but really important issue if the Year of Public Art is actually going to do something that is significantly different, you know, when it comes to, you know, the new public art that we bring into this city.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we gotta get it. It's gotta be right, and every fraction of of the parties and of the people that are reviewing these projects, you know, there has to be representation of Black artists, of Black curators, of Indigenous artists, Indigenous curators, of queer communities, of trans folk. There needs to be proper representation from the top to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've even seen like the percentages of, like, you know, Black artists being represented by contemporary galleries. I was reading an article on Canadian art, and it's literally 11 Black artists that are represented by contemporary galleries, and 7 of them are dead. So I think that goes to show how there needs to be this idea where the different diverse groups, diverse artists are always in the mind, because if they're not in the mind, they're out of sight. There just needs to be that constant consideration. And again, if we're thinking about awakening, right, and we're thinking about this unified feel, awakening can only happen if there's mindfulness. And I think that's been something that we've been missing, you know, within these systemic structures, is there isn't a mindfulness of these other artists' experiences and these other artists' voices. So I think that would help a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, excellent. Does anyone else have anything they want to say about that last point?
Well, I think that we operate within a very traditional model of jurying applications for projects, and I think it's usually transparent at the end. You know, they tell you who was on the jury, but I think we need to examine that model, and maybe we need to, and not to say that we dismantle it entirely, but there may be a way that we can open up how projects are chosen to different models of processes. So it's not necessarily a closed jury. So perhaps it's something else. Do we have citizens' choice, or you know, I don't know, something fun, something spontaneous, maybe something not so controlled, but something that's a little bit scary. I mean, I think we need to be bold here and look at new ways to give people opportunity. Of course, Indigenous artists have been waiting for this. Black artists also. I also think about refugee populations, new populations in Toronto who are, you know, really don't know where to put their feet down yet, and we need to give them a chance as well. So I'm hoping that we will find and be willing to make mistakes in this process, that we don't need to get it perfectly right, but that we can trust each other enough. And when I say each other, I don't mean just the officials who are engaged at the top level, but I mean all of us, every citizen, that we trust each other enough, that we can all participate and do something beautiful together.
Mm-hmm. That's beautifully said.
Yes, thanks.
Sorry.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Juan.
go ahead.
Yeah,
Joe.
I just a couple of comments there. You know, I recognize that, and trust me, I love sitting here listening to you speak because it means a lot. And sometimes we get so caught up within the walls of City Hall, right? And it's hard to really think differently in the way that you're speaking. And I want to say thanks for that. And you know, I'm honored to be able to sit on the same screen with you all and you know, with the committee. And I know that, you know, I know there's criticism toward the City of Toronto about hiring all the, you know, the usual suspects when it comes to commissioning public arts within the City of Toronto over the past however many years. And that's a thing. You know, the Year of Public Art, to your point, Bonnie, it is an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to change that and to test out the peer review paneling of what that could look like for certain selections for certain things, whether it's a curator selection for a community cultural hub that we're going to try to get going, or it's for the grant applications that we're going to put forward, right? Like, we want to have representation, and not just diverse representation from all walks of life. So folks from, you know, the external working committees and interdivisional working committees and community members. So people who are dedicated and very within a community, whether it's, you know, just you brought up Scarborough and Nuit Blanche going to Scarborough. It could be North York, it could be Rexdale for that matter, right? And people who live in those communities and can speak to what that community actually needs and what it might like and what fits and what works, right? So I think, you know, just to round it out, when we launch our grant application, partnership application next week, fingers crossed, you know, we're going to have that opportunity to get money out the door and have a selection process that is deemed as fair. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about seeing the rollout of that and seeing how many people submit and what the outcome is.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of artists and organizations that are eagerly awaiting that. We're at 3 o'clock, and I think we should probably wrap it up here. There are, I mean, still quite a lot of questions, as is usually the case, that we just unfortunately won't be able to get to. But we will make an effort to answer these questions and send responses back to you folks. I really want to thank you, Joe, for all of the really wonderful information you shared with us, and again, just sort of echo how exciting Year of Public Art 2021 is sure to be, and thank our panelists for their not only insightful answers, but answers with real heart and thoughtfulness and conscience. I think the city is really lucky to have you guys on the External Advisory Committee, and I'm sure your thoughtfulness is going to be reflected in the way things are steered and directed. So thank you for everything, and for being part of today's conversation.
Thanks, Rui.
Thank you.